and welcome back for another costume tutorial featuring thrifted treasures. We're doing couples this week, so we're doing Stranger Things and Beetlejuice. We're going to start with a breakdown of our costumes from Stranger Things. So both of our characters work at a nautical-themed ice cream parlor. Steve has a navy shirt and navy shorts, and Robin has a blue sweater, vest, and blue shorts. Both have the Ahoy hat. I started by looking for a striped shirt to use as a base for Robin's costume. I then found a set of scrubs, including a shirt and a pair of pants that were similarly colored for Steve. I then found a t-shirt that matched the shorts that I found for Robin. I made sure there was a lot of blank space on the front and back because this is going to become our vest. I also visited the clearance center where things are $1.29 a pound and found a shirt and tie for my later projects. I started by cutting the legs off of the pants to make them into shorts instead of long pants. I then used stitch witchery, which is a fusible sewing substitute, to create the hemline on the shorts. All you do is lay it in place, fold it under, and iron. I also used that to put the ribbon stripes on the shorts. I did this on both sides of the shorts, and I also did it for my shorts for Robin. Next, I started by removing the front and sleeves from my t-shirt so that I could have my base for my vest. The piece left is going to serve as the back. I then cut two smaller pieces out of my excess fabric that was an identical shape altogether, and then cut out the shape of the front of my vest. I then pinned them together at the top where the shoulders are going to be and the sides, and I sewed them together with my serger. You can sew this by hand, or you can use a regular sewing machine, or if you're really creative, you can use stitch witchery for it as well, or hot glue. And voila, we have our vest created. I then made a mixture of paint using both acrylic paint for opacity and fabric paint for flexibility. This is going to be what I use to paint my ice cream cone on both the vest and on Steve's shirt. I started by sketching out the base of the ice cream cone with just fabric paint. I then did the same thing for the ice cream cone, gently sketching it on top and filling it in with the white fabric paint. After the first layer was done, I went in with my mixture of acrylic paint and fabric paint on top of my first layer of paint. And then I just added layers until I was happy with how it looked and edged it with the fabric paint. And there we have our completed vest. Make sure you don't forget to paint the same thing on Steve's shirt. I then created a pattern for the collar out of tissue paper and cut it out of an old shirt found at Goodwill. I then cut out a second collar made out of the red t-shirt material, making sure to leave a little bit of edge for a border. And then I sewed them together. You can also finish the edges. I then used fabric paint to trace two white lines around the edge of the collar. I also made the insert out of the t-shirt and putting a white stripe on it. Once I finished, I pinned that to the scrubs top. For the tie, I used a long oval made out of the red fabric, folded it in half, and used stitch witchery to put it together. I then used the excess fabric on the collar to tie the tie in place. And voila, you have your finished Steve Harrington shirt. For Robin's collar, I traced out another collar shape on tissue paper and cut out the fabric out of a bedsheet. I cut out two of them and then used the stitch witchery to affix them together. I then hand-stitched the collar in place around the shirt and added the red line around the collar with fabric paint. Much like with Steve's tie, I cut out an oval for Robin's shirt, and then I used a small piece to attach it to the shirt, and then hand-sewed it in place. Here's our finished shirt for Robin. Robin's shoe of choice on the show is a red Converse All-Star. Keds will also work, or if you can't find your size, you can use another shoe and paint it the right color. That's that's the option that I chose to do. Once I painted it red, I used nail polish remover to go ahead and take the excess paint off of the silver fixings and off of the bottom of the shoe. Nail polish remover is also a great way to make old shoes look new again because they will take off all of the dirt. Steve's shoes on the show are blue sneakers, but since these black All-Stars were in such nice condition, I decided to go with those for his shoes. For the hat, I bought a hat from Party City and removed the patch. I then drew the Ahoy on in pencil and used fabric paint to fill it in. For the name tags, I cut out 2 pieces of red foam, covered them with a piece of cotton, and applied heat to them. Applying heat to foam helps to harden it just a little bit. It makes it a little bit more pliable. But it also curves the edges under, which is a little bit more appropriate for the name tag. Once the heat was removed, I applied pressure for just a couple of seconds to flatten them out and added the designs with fabric paint. And there we have our finished costumes for Robin and Steve. This is one of the #1 costumes trending this season, and I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out. On to our next set of costumes, Beetlejuice and Lydia. So Lydia has a lot of possible options. You can do the classic gothic look, you can do the look from the cartoon. I was a little bit more inspired by her costume in the Broadway musical, so I found a beautiful black gown. The dress was already pretty perfect as it was, serving up some gothic realness with long sleeves, long skirt, and a higher neckline. I also added some black combat boots for good measure. If you want to follow the hat tutorial from last week, you can add a hat to your strange and unusual costume to make it a little more recognizable. And now for the main event, Mr. Beetlejuice himself. We started by looking for a black suit coat, as well as a pair of black pants, and a white shirt to wear underneath. For his shoes, we chose a simple pair of black dress shoes. Once home, I laid my suit pieces out on a flat surface and used painter's tape to create the stripes. You have to make sure that you're using the stripes to put the black where you want it because the part that is exposed is going to be white. I used a spray paint that was good for fabric, but you can use regular spray paint on it. Just make sure that you seal it with cold water once you've finished spraying. Remember, you need to let it dry in between layers, but the more layers you add, the better the white is going to show up on the suit. I did the same thing for the pants, and then I took the tape off. You can use acrylic paint or fabric paint to the same effect, but this is definitely the quickest and easiest way to get this effect. I also decided to make the handbook for the recently deceased as a prop for the costume, so I made a mixture of glue and water, making sure to mix it so there are no chunky pieces. I then added a layer of the glue mixture on top of a book I found at Goodwill. And then on top of that, I added a layer of tissue paper for texture, adding another layer of the glue mixture so that it adheres to the book. Make sure to adhere the edges to the corners of the book as well so that they don't peel up. Then remove the extra tissue paper from around the book. Once the layer was dry, I made my perfect color using acrylic paint and painted it on top of my newly textured book. Adding texture with tissue paper is a great way to age a book, making it look either more worn or used or a little bit more like leather if you add a glossy layer on top. Once dry, I began creating my design, starting with an opaque white layer to put everything else on top of. I painted the rest of the design out with acrylic paint and added the words. For Lydia, we added a black wig with PC bangs, but for Beetlejuice, we just used hairspray paint from our local Halloween store and added makeup. And there we have our completed couples costumes. Tune in next week for more costume tutorials to use this season.